Arlington County Board is now in session for our fiscal year 2022 virtual budget hearing. I have a couple of announcements. We'll go to the manager. Thank you and welcome to all of our guests who are here to testify with your thoughts and priorities for the budget. As we do so, I just have a few announcements that I'll start with. Over the past several weeks, the board has held a number of work sessions to discuss the budget and priorities. And we have also heard from our leaders of our staff leaders, our department leaders, and our role as board members tonight is a different one. It is to listen carefully to the citizens, to you, the residents that we have the honor to represent in Arlington County, so that we gain a clear understanding of our community as a whole's needs and the programs and services that are important to you. On Thursday, April 8th, the board will hold a public hearing on the proposed tax rates. Tonight is on the budget. We'll also hear on Thursday the fee schedule changes and a few county code amendments. The online sign up for Thursday's hearing is available at www.countyboard.arlingtonpa.us or by calling 703-228-3130. The board will act on the proposed fiscal year 2022 budget and tax rates likely at the April 17th, could be at the April 20th county board meeting, will be final action. April 20th is our recessed meeting, and that is likely when we will take final action. Before we begin with public testimony, we will receive a brief update from our county manager, Mark Schwartz, on COVID-19, very brief, and then on the budget. Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. First, I wanted to start off with an update on COVID-19, and pleased to report that we're going to begin sending scheduling notifications to eligible individuals in phase 1C by the end of this week. And all the while, we're going to continue to integrate those who are continuing to pre-register in phase 1A and 1B. And we're on track to move to phase 2 by April 18th. Simultaneous with that, we're still manually working through a number of essential employer submissions that contain incomplete or inaccurate data. For example, there are dozens of individuals who signed up on behalf of a business, but included very little detail. So that requires us to go through the work of manually figuring out what's going on with each of the businesses. And so there's a lot of intensive staff work with that. So more to come on that. So that's my update on COVID. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Mr. Stevenson, who will walk us through a short slide presentation with summaries of the budget proposal. Over to you, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. As you just said, I'll walk through a few slides highlighting the proposed budget before we get started with the public hearing. So starting off, guided by the board's direction in the development of the proposed budget, the manager developed the budget for our fiscal year 2022, which utilizes one-time funds, keeps the tax rate flat for over calendar year 2020, and focuses on COVID-19 pandemic responses. Some areas of focus, which we'll highlight in a moment, include pandemic relief efforts, food insecurity, affordable housing, and several other priority areas that will bridge us to an economy that we hopefully anticipate recovering over the next fiscal year. So as we were developing the proposed budget in January, real estate assessments came in slightly higher than we were anticipating, relieving some of the very difficult budget decisions we were considering at the time. Real estate assessments increased 2.2% in the aggregate, supported by continued strength in residential assessments. The proposed budget does include over $16 million in budget reductions and achieves some budgetary efficiencies through a variety of operational changes, some due to changes made as we adjusted to a virtual work environment. In addition, one-time funding was utilized to bridge the revenue funding gap. Now, the proposed operating budget totals $1.36 billion and includes funding to our Arlington Public School partners based on the principles of revenue sharing of all local taxes. The next two slides highlight some of the FY 2022 priorities included in the proposed budget. It sets aside $17.5 million for COVID-related responses and emphasizes a focus to a variety of housing needs. With constrained resources, it provides some additional funding for one-time pay increases and expands some low-cost employee benefits. Provides additional funds for our efforts on equity and begins some work as proposed by the Police Practices Group. And it also includes a proposal to increase our investment in critically needed stormwater infrastructure by proposing an increase to the stormwater tax rate. In addition, a number of other areas receive needed resources to continue commitments in their funding. These include our regional commitment to Metro, completing the staffing changes to achieve a shorter work week for our fire personnel, making some investments in other public safety areas, as you can see on the slide, and investing in two long planned for and now almost complete facilities of Long Bridge and Lubber Run. So some things have changed since we proposed the budget in February that I'd like to highlight here on this slide. The American Rescue Plan was passed by the federal government last month, which will provide additional funds to both the county and schools. Almost $46 million will be coming to the county over the next 14 months or so. The initial legislation lacked some specificity, and we are awaiting additional guidance from the federal government in the appropriate utilization of these funds. We do know that a number of the reductions we have had to take in the proposed budget could be restored with these federal monies. The manager will be coming back to the board in community once more information is known, which we expect to be later in May. We also experienced strong business license tax revenue receipts this spring. We were unsure of the impact of this on this tax source since it was based on business activity in the last calendar year, one that was influenced by the impact of the pandemic. With the strength in these tax receipts, we have slightly increased our revenue assumption for FY 2022, allowing the board to consider additional investments in employee compensation or other areas that have been highlighted in the budget work sessions, and I expect here tonight at public comment on the budget. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight the budget process we've been going through since the manager proposed, concluding with budget adoption at either the April 17th or April 20th recess meeting, and our new fiscal year starting July 1st. And with that, I'll turn it over to the manager if he has any additional comments he'd like to make.
Yes, I'd like to thank Richard and turn it back to the chair of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Schwartz. I have a few announcements, but we also have at least 41 speakers. And so I just wanted to, if Mr. Stevenson, if you're willing to just turn it to slide 6 for a quick moment, would very much appreciate that. We have received a ton of letters on a couple of priorities, including the Virginia Cooperative Extension. If you look at in the bottom of this slide, at least we want to hear from all of you. It is my view, and I think others on the boards, that there are a couple of items that are listed there that we are likely to restore funding for, including the one that we perhaps gotten the most emails on, Virginia Cooperative Extension. So that my impression is that colleagues may share that view, and I believe the manager is inclined to recommend restoring those items. I don't know, Mr. Manager, you may not want to speak too much more to it, but based on the passage of the American Rescue Plan, should we take that bullet there regarding Lee Highway and AIM and Virginia Cooperative Extension and the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust to mean that your recommendation would be to restore some of the proposed cuts in those items at the very least?
Yes, so again, since the decision making is up to the county board, I can only speak to what my recommendations are. Given the recent budget developments, I would propose funding to restore libraries and community centers. And this is an important point, as close to July 1 as possible. For many places, that may not mean July 1 because we'll need to restore, get staff on board and make sure we're following pandemic protocols. So it could be several months after that. And also with the additional funds that became available due to the business license tax receipts, I will recommend to the board the restoration of the cuts and the reductions of the one-time money associated with the items listed on that next to last bullet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager. And we as a board want to hear all your comments, but I also wanted to reflect at least my view as well as the managers and colleagues. We don't make final decisions until we make final decisions, but did want to give those who may be speaking on an item that has come up before. One option is to just take your time and echo the comments of someone who's come before you with respect to a certain item. We will stay and listen to all of you who want to speak, but I did want to provide that context for you. Now I'm going to give you just a minute or two, if you decide you still want to speak, some procedures. And so just so that we're all on the same page with respect to how we're speaking, we are ready to hear from all of our public speakers. The clerk will begin to call speakers two at a time, beginning with the pre-registered 2-minute speakers, followed by the pre-registered 3-minute speakers. We will then hear from anyone that has registered after the start of the 7 p.m. meeting in order by the 2-minute and 3-minute time intervals. Speaker sign-up will be available online at www.countyboard.arlingtonva.us or by phone. If you are seeking to call in via phone, the number that you would need to call is 571-397-1863. I'll say it again, 571-397-1863 if you want to register your preference to speak. Please keep your microphones muted and your cameras off, please, until you are called to speak. We're all in one Teams meeting, so that would help us. The moderator can mute you, but cannot unmute you. If you are calling in by phone, press *6 to unmute. If you're using a computer browser or app, click the microphone button on the toolbar. You are not required to turn your camera on when speaking, but you're welcome to. Listen for the tone to indicate when your time has elapsed. That will come up at the end of your 2 and 3 minutes. I believe a Spanish language interpreter is on the line if needed for individual testimony only. Would you introduce yourself in English and Spanish, please?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Castro, and I will be your Spanish and English interpreter. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Laura Castro y seré su intérprete de inglés y español. Gracias. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Ms. Castro. Repetitious testimony, as I kind of mentioned, is discouraged. Feel free to simply associate yourself with previous remarks. After speaking, you may exit the call and continue to listen in on other speakers in the meeting via the live stream at www.arlingtonva.us or cable channels Comcast 25 and 1085 and Verizon Fios channels 39 and 40. Those wishing to submit written comments in lieu of oral presentations may do so at any time by email to our email address, which is countyboard@arlingtonva.us. With that, Madam Clerk, will you please call the first 2 speakers?
Yes, and before doing so, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify that the online registration and the phone number that you gave will be available until 8 p.m. tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So first 2 speakers.
Okay, our first 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Romana Campos, followed by Brian Lynch.
Ms. Campos. Are you there, Ms. Campos? Okay, so we'll go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, Ms. Campos?
Yeah.
You there?
Can you hear me okay?
We can, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We could hear.
I wanted just to
Sure.
for the cooperative extension. I'm sorry?
Go ahead, we can hear
You're
you.
not here? Okay. I just wanted to express my support for the Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'm a master naturalist and a tree steward, and I've also a 4-H volunteer. So I've been able to see up close the kind of clients, the kind of kids that the Extension Service reaches. And as a RMN member and as a tree steward, I really value nature and environmental education. And I believe a lot of the kids that are in this program have nature deprivation by being a lot of times indoors and staring at the screen too long. And certainly we know with COVID that's happened. So more than anything, I really think that the 4-H program which reaches about 400 children really is a big bang for the buck. And it's also a big bang for the buck because there's 900 volunteers that are managed by a very small core staff that would lose 2 or 3 full-time positions and 2 part-time positions if they're cut. But I just wanted to say, as a person of color, as a Hispanic, and as a person that wanted to be in Girl Scouts and do camping and couldn't because my parents were too busy and they worked and my mom couldn't drive, I really appreciate the programs that the 4-H offers and the camp and the accessibility and the way they really go out to all parts of the community, to WIC, to Head Start, to the community centers, and they really put their services out there. That's, to me, the meaning of accessibility. And I think there's a equation of equity in which they're trying to reach those most vulnerable and those that need the services like financial literacy or nutritional counseling, what have you. A lot of new immigrants really need those kinds of skills. And having lived in 4 countries in Latin America and India, I understand how hard it is for immigrants coming from that country to our country. So I just wanted to say thank you. If you are going to support them, and that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Campos.
You're welcome.
Our next speaker is Brian Lynch, followed by Nancy Broff.
Mr. Lynch.
Good evening, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
I'm Brian Lynch, and I have never been prouder to represent the women and men of the Arlington Professional Firefighters and Paramedics Association. Today is the 391st day on the front lines of COVID-19. Being firefighters has always meant risking our lives for others. However, COVID-19 changed our world and now puts our families at risk too, every time we go home. While this creates great concern in our ranks, we have continued to answer the calls of the people of Arlington. Yet, over the past year, our take-home pay has decreased as wages stayed flat and healthcare costs increased. We know these are difficult economic times, but it's disappointing to see a budget that has Arlington firefighters receiving no merit increases for a second year in a row. We have done our part, going over and above to keep the community safe, and should be recognized for extraordinary efforts. Around us, we see wage increases in the private sector. We hear reports that federal, state, and other local governments are finding sustained ways to reward workers, including Arlington's own public schools. A one-time bonus is not the solution. With the addition of federal money, you can make salary improvements. The board needs to find administrative solutions instead of bureaucratic excuses. Taxpayers invest over $100,000 to recruit and train a firefighter. Next year, many firefighters with nearly 5 years of service will be making less than a new hire in Fairfax. If you cannot afford to pay them a bit more, then what future will they see here? Let's be smart and spend a little now on compensation before you spend millions in replacing firefighters and losing skilled emergency responders. Thank you for your time and stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch.
Our next speaker is Nancy Broff, followed by Ann Reed.
Ms. Broff. Are you there, Ms. Broff?
We will
come
check.
back. Go ahead.
Sure thing. Our next speaker is Ann Reed, followed by Kemi Reed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Reed.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
My name is Ann Reed, and I'm an Arlington Extension Master Gardener. I am representing the concerns of all Master Gardeners in Arlington. I have a guest with me tonight, and this is Queen Ruby Honeybee, who is representing her hive. Both of us are disappointed and a little bit shocked that the Arlington County Board may defund by 50% the budget for the Arlington Virginia Cooperative Extension. And tonight I chose to sort of loop my message to focus on the value of vision and mission statements. And that's why I'm here to remind the board of its own vision statements and its impact on the lives of Arlington residents. So let's look at how one EMG volunteer, myself, helps to fulfill your vision and also to do the work that's necessary. Let me start with one part of the vision statement, diverse and inclusive. I volunteer in the 4-H program that sponsors clubs for underserved youth at 16 sites, including all 8 APS Title I schools. Ruby is my sidekick, and I also volunteer with Arlington Neighborhood Village to teach seniors aging at home basic techniques. Attractive Neighborhoods, I volunteer weekly with the Master Gardener Help Desk. As another one is for People Uniting. I volunteered as a South Arlington regional coordinator for the Free Seed Project last fall and this spring. Reached out to many neighborhoods. Sustainable Community, through the Virginia Cooperative Extension training, I'm now a practitioner that advises neighbors in my community, and I volunteer in the demonstration gardens. Each person is important to me. All of this is free to Arlington residents, and we could multiply my efforts by over 900 people. So I encourage the county board to trust and live up to the vision statement. $63,682. Is it worth the loss?
Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Master Gardeners. Thank you.
Thank you both for testifying. Appreciate it. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Kimmy Reed, followed by Ellie Freed.
Ms. Reed. Ms. Kimmy Reed.
Hello, my name is Kimmy Reed, and I am a current junior at Washington Liberty High School. I want to thank the county board members for your continued support of Arlington Independent Media, also known as AIM. I join you in supporting AIM because they have made such a meaningful impact on my life. I am the co-founder and president of Students for Racial Equity, SRE, a student-led community organization that advocates for anti-racist policies in the classroom and school. We work with students, parents, educators, and leaders in Arlington to bring a collective understanding of the roles that race play in our community. We connect with students about their experiences with systemic inequities, create content for facilitated dialogues on equity, and we circulate those dialogues with the help of Arlington Independent Media. The people at AIM have been steady mentors and allies, from giving me training on how to make SRE into a podcast and radio show, allowing access to media production equipment, mentoring me on various SRE endeavors, and being our fiscal agent. AIM is what we should all strive to be, amplifiers of equity. Arlington has a lot of work to do when it comes to equity. I've experienced and witnessed numerous systemic inequities at both the school and county level. AIM has given me equal access to opportunities and has supported my efforts to promote equity throughout the county. I urge the county board to continue your commitment to supplementing the operating budget so that AIM can continue to support the work of diverse youth such as Students for Racial Equity. I hope you will all listen to our radio show and podcast when it is ready this summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reed. One of the challenges of not being in person is we don't get to convey all our thanks for those who work away, but thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Okay, Ellie Freed or Fried, followed by Teresa German.
Ms. Freed, is it?
Yes, Ms. Reed. Good evening. My name is Ellie. I graduated from HB Woodlawn last year, and this year I'm taking a gap year because of the pandemic. Last summer, I was on the hunt for volunteer opportunities in Arlington that I could do virtually and safely while helping our community, and I was really happy to find the Energy Masters program created by Eco Action Arlington in partnership with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. Energy Masters is an award-winning program that promotes energy and water conservation, helps our communities meet reduce their utility expenses, and provides conservation education to encourage behavior change. As Energy Masters volunteers, we received specialized training where I learned everything from basic building science to how to use a caulk gun to the state of affordable housing in Arlington and Alexandria. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we weren't able to go into affordable housing units and make hands-on energy efficiency improvements and educate tenants in person. Instead, we focused our efforts on providing virtual opportunities to educate residents and their families to encourage behavioral change for sustained impact. I made many digital flyers for our social media and newsletters advertising our various virtual events, most of which are free, including Energy Masters Bingo with prizes, live webinars on how to cool your home, indoor air quality, demystifying utility bills, and most of which are available in English, Spanish, and Amharic. And currently, my small group of Energy Masters volunteers is making quick, informative, engaging videos on the 3 common types of light bulbs, which will be accessible in English, Spanish, and Amharic, and will be shared with tenants through newsletters and social media by the end of spring. I just want to end by saying Energy Masters is just a wonderful program that provides great quality training to residents, including high schoolers all the way to seniors, and implements a train-the-trainer model to educate and engage tenants in affordable housing units, and water efficiency. So I ask that the county board restore full funding to the CE.
Thank you, Ms. Freed.
Our next speaker is Teresa German, followed by Carol Skelly.
Ms.
Yes,
German.
hello. My name is Teresa Germain, and I'm an Arlington County resident and also an Extension Leadership Council member. I'm also here to support, restoring funding for Extension for the next fiscal year. Just to highlight some of the things that that we want you to emphasize is that we have 900 dedicated, well-trained volunteers that provide 40,000 hours of programming every year, which is equivalent to about 20 full-time employees, or about $1.2 million in value annually. The $64,000 cut that the manager proposed, what you probably don't know is if we lose that funding, the local funding, we also lose about $150,000 in matching funds from the state, federal government, and private sources. So that's why the $64,000 is critical, as it triggers matching funds from other places. And those funds are primarily for volunteer management, program management, and content development that the agents do. And that's why we really think it's important that that be emphasized. Also, I'm here to present a petition. Because of the pandemic, we have not been able to, have our ardent supporters come and, show their opinions and voice their, dismay at this budget cut. So we have we put together in the last 4 days, collected a petition with 600 signatures that showed how widespread the Virginia Cooperative Extension support actually is. And it's on your screen at the moment. These are all the signatures, and they're all Arlington County residents. In addition to being a executive leadership council member, I'm also a master financial volunteer, and I have personally seen how Virginia Cooperative Extension has impacted Arlington County residents in the area of financial literacy.
Thank you, Ms.
Classes that help, millennials pay their student loans, are given at, senior centers to help seniors live on fixed incomes, and like interview skills, job skills, help the unemployed and foster kids get, jobs. These are programs that really have a major impact on lives. And in conclusion, I just want to say that we really encourage you to restore the funding so that we can keep the extension alive and keep these programs flowing, especially during the pandemic when they're particularly needed in the area of financial literacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Germain, for the comments and also the petition with so many signatures. It is a difficult time to get input, but we very much appreciate it. Also, thank you for your work on financial literacy, financial independence and strength. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Carol Skelly, followed by Millie Nandikar Thomas.
Ms. Skelly.
Good evening, members of the board and Mr. Schwartz. I am the chair of the Community Services Board's Committee on Developmental Disabilities. I'm speaking to ask that you take steps to prioritize new capacity for day and employment programs here in Arlington. Our adult clients with developmental disabilities need day and employment programs for training, social connection, and engagement with the wider community. The number of clients who need services has increased by about 50% over the past 10 years, due in part to the rising incidence.
That's okay. I still haven't reached your guy. I've called him back twice.
Ms. Skelly, I think it's Kelly. Oh, she went on mute. Ms. Skelly, I think you can go ahead again. Go ahead.
Okay. The number of clients who need services has increased by about 50% over the past 10 years, due in part to the rising incidence of autism spectrum disorders. At the same time, higher operations costs have been funded largely with increases in state Medicaid, which has left county expenditures nearly flat. While state Medicaid assistance for developmental disabilities is helpful for ongoing costs, it does not finance capital investment. Arlington has reached a crisis in day and employment program capacity, resulting in waiting lists and ever higher numbers of clients with no option but to go outside the county for services. The members of the Developmental Disabilities Committee are asking you to support more opportunities in our local community, Arlington. We are recommending that you make a down payment on the needed capacity by leveraging approximately $4 million in funds, which will not be spent on services in FY21 due to the pandemic, and which will revert to the county general fund if not earmarked for this purpose. This seems like a win-win to us, since use of these funds will not detract from other human service priorities. We are also asking that you help to expedite the various county processes that will be involved, including the identification of space and procurement for contract operators, so that we can bring the needed programs online as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Skelly.
Our next speaker is Millie Nandikar Thomas, followed by Lucia Claster.
Ms. Nandikar Thomas.
Thank you. I'm speaking to support the CSB Committee on Developmental Disabilities request to reserve $4 million to fund new day and employment programs for adults with disabilities. You may not realize how many Arlington adults with disabilities need this. As a mom of a nonverbal adult with cerebral palsy and autism, my husband and I toured numerous programs in and outside Arlington for years. And before he graduated from APS, only Arlington's Woodmont program was appropriate. Based on his needs, we thought he would be placed there, but found out it's at capacity and now has a waiting list because the demand is so great. Our son graduated from APS during the pandemic. He has been home with us for the past year, and now, with no openings at Woodmont, his future remains uncertain. Based on the severity of his disability, he would not be safe in a day program outside of Arlington. He needs Woodmont, which is contingent on funding from the CSB. We remain in limbo, and we are not alone. When the pandemic is over, because programs in other jurisdictions outside the county are also full, many families will find themselves without options for their adult children. As a mom, a tax-paying citizen, and a long-term Arlingtonian, I urge you to use the surplus fiscal year 2021 funds to build new day programs so Arlington citizens with disabilities can remain in their own community, which is here in Arlington. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nandikar Thomas.
Our next speaker is Lucia Claster, followed by Kanji Edward.
Ms. Claster.
Members of the board and Mr. Schwartz, thank you so much for your continued support of individuals with disabilities who live in our community. I strongly encourage you to support the request of our CSB Committee on Developmental Disabilities to reserve the unused 2021 funds to expand day and employment programs here in Arlington. Day program closures over the past year have left adults with disabilities sitting at home, often cared for by aging parents, losing skills and abilities to function in the community. Others have lost jobs or had to stop working, unsure when or if they will be able to return to work. Many of these adults will need support and skills retraining, which will increase the pressure on existing day and employment program offerings. When our son exited school 2+ years ago, the day programs in Arlington were already full, with one-year waiting lists. To receive such services, he would have had to travel by van to day program sites out in Oakton, Chantilly, or Springfield, which were just too far away. Ultimately, I arranged for him to play piano at senior living facilities here in Arlington with the help of a personal attendant so he could stay in his community. However, when COVID hit, these facilities closed, and our son has been home now for 1 year. Despite my best efforts to keep him engaged, he has lost many crucial skills and his work future is uncertain. Like many others, he will need day and employment program services going forward. We are just one family. There are many families like ours in this community. Arlington individuals with disabilities need and deserve the opportunity to receive day and employment program services in their community. This past year, too many of these residents have received too few services. This is an equity issue that cannot be ignored. Please reserve the unspent FY2021 funds so that we can strategically expand day and employment program capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Claster.
Our next speaker is Kanjit Edward, followed by Elizabeth Valente.
Kanjit Edward.
Yes,
Edward.
good evening. Honorable Mr. Matt DeFerrante, Arlington County Board Chair, Arlington County Board members. My name is Kanjit Edward. I'm a United States citizen who have been working with Ethiopian Community Development Council for the last 17 years at a different capacity. As a former client myself and current employee of ECDC, I'm here to thank you for funding our support service program to help us serving Arlington residents who need our services. As you know, ECDC plays a crucial role in helping communities to be self-sufficient and become a vital part of the greater community. ECDC is a community-based organization that was founded in 1983 as a tax-exempt non-profit organization. Though our primary mission is to resettle refugees and assist asylums in many parts of the country, our local office in Arlington, Virginia, with the support of the county funding our support service program, assists Arlington residents in the following areas: employment, immigration, translation interpretation, housing, cultural adjustment, domestic violence and prevention and education, youth life skills training. As a former client myself, I want to share my own history. With the help of ECDC, I was able to adjust smoothly and become self-sufficient in a very short period of time, wherein 3 years I was able to purchase my house and send my daughter to college, who is now a health professional assisting with the pandemic. I greatly appreciate your continued support to help us serve the Arlington residents. Thank you. Stay safe. May God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Ms. Edward, for your comments and your service.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Valente, followed by Jeanette O'Keefe.
Ms. Flente. Are you there, Ms. Flente?
Oops. Okay. We will go to Jeanette O'Keefe, followed by Sarah Zulu.
Ms. O'Keefe. Are you there, Jeanette O'Keefe? Okay.
Okay.
Oh, Ms. O'Keefe. Was that you, Ms. O'Keefe?
Smith.
There we go. I'm sorry. I was having trouble with my mic. My apologies.
No problem. Go ahead, Ms. O'Keefe.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Arlington's Community Services Board. The CSB appreciates your understanding of the complexity of lives lived and services needed by our clients in the areas of behavioral health and developmental disability. Navigating services during COVID has been an immense challenge, asking a great deal of clients and staff. As early in COVID, services moved from in-person to various virtual modes of treatment where possible, and made required safety changes for services that required one-on-one interaction. But that was only the beginning. Throughout the pandemic, adjustments in service needs and intermittent staff reassignments were necessary to meet the demands of the moment. Challenges to CSB clients have increased exponentially as the effects of COVID isolation continued. We have had an increase in clients and serious conditions across the disability areas. Nonetheless, the CSB strives to meet the needs of its clients equitably using best practice concepts and seeking growth and development in its delivery of client services. These goals need your support. We strongly ask that you endorse the county manager's budget, specifically in the areas that support services for our clients. The individuals we serve every day have debilitating disabilities and have been under inordinate stress during this pandemic and are working very hard to live the most fulfilling lives they are able to live. Your understanding and support is vital to our clients' welfare and the overall Arlington community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. O'Keefe.
Our next speaker is Sarah Zullo, followed by Michelle Santuso.
Ms. Zullo.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Zullo. I'm the director of ECDC, a branch the director of ACCDC Metro, which is a branch office of ECDC. And tonight, I just wanted to take a few moments to let you know why the county should not just continue to fund, but consider increasing the funding that is given to community-based organizations such as ECDC. Because we are truly the bridges between the county and the community. And this could not be more apparent than during the pandemic. At a time when almost everybody closed their door and went home, we were still on the ground educating our community and helping them to stay safe by providing PPPs, emergency food and rental assistance, and training and explaining the ever-changing safety guideline from the CDC and local government. And when it was time to provide and inform our communities, by disseminating effort to local churches, ECDC was once again in the front line. And our information dissemination effort to local churches, community centers, social media, and even going door to door, knocking, this resulted in having close to 1,000 Arlington residents getting vaccinated this past weekend. And we are planning to continue this effort in the coming weeks. So we hope this mutual beneficial partnership will continue to grow and flourish. And we thank you once again for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zullo. We certainly saw the more than 2,000 people who are vaccinated. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you much.
This next speaker.
The next speaker is Michelle Santuso, followed by Pete Scampavia.
Ms. Santuso.
Hello, good evening. My name is Michelle Santuso, and I am co-chair of the Emergency Preparedness Advisory Commission. As stated in our FY22 budget recommendation letter to the county board, EPAC supports the proposed increases in stormwater management, the selected police practices group recommendations listed in our budget letter, and utilizing closeout funding on pandemic relief. This, we believe, will enhance our ability to be a safe, secured, resilient community. Furthermore, EPAC has identified the following additional top priorities. Policing. The proposed freeze and vacancies of ACPD staff members leaves the county at lower staff levels than we've had in the past. We would appreciate a more complete explanation as to how ACPD will be able to meet their priorities at this staffing level. Cybersecurity. More attention and resources need to be directed toward educating the community on best practices to secure home and small business networks. Further, reducing cyber investment and the proposed technology staff cuts are risky to the county and regional supply chains. Community emergency preparedness planning and response volunteers. The county should provide budgetary and resource support to volunteer organizations such as the Community Emergency Response Team. Communication and training should occur on a regular and frequent basis. Some additional long-term funding priorities we've identified. The Comprehensive Emergency Management Response Plan is past due for review and potential revision. We recommend that the county reviews this plan to incorporate best practices and lessons learned through COVID-19 and high threat incidents. And additionally, the High Threat Response Program. This is a critical initiative to help the county better prepare for atypical emergency events. Given program staff cuts due to funding and budget constraints, EPAC highly recommends that the county funds this program to previous staffing levels. We look forward to working with you and the departments and citizens, ensuring that we remain a resilient community. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Santuzo. I'm particularly glad that you got to join us tonight after the work session didn't quite fit, but thank you for your leadership of EPAC. Next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker is Pete Scampavia, followed by Sally Diaz-Wells.
Mr. Scampavia.
Hi, my name is Sherry Takamoto, and I'm speaking on behalf of my son, Pete Scampavia. Unlike many of his friends with developmental disabilities, Pete has lived in the community and enjoyed working in the community. And today he's hanging out with two of his high school friends who were vaccinated and said that it was because he hadn't seen them for so long that he had to blow this off. But he did want to speak on behalf of his friends with disabilities, which he continues to want to do, and ask you to reserve the $4 million for the reserved for developmental disabilities employment and day programs. And thank you very much. And sorry, Pete couldn't make it.
No problem. Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Sally Diaz-Wells, followed by John Lau.
Ms. Diaz-Wells.
Good evening. My name is Sally Diaz-Wells. I'm the Social Justice and Outreach Minister at Our Lady Queen of Peace Catholic Church in South Arlington. But tonight, I'm here with voice. The COVID-19 pandemic have wreaked havoc with the lives of families in our community who are already dealing with housing and food insecurity. Our Wednesday distribution of food now serve up to 700 families each week, more than double the number before the pandemic. They work hard, these families, they pay taxes, they help to keep our county running, but they still struggle. Thank you so very much for stepping up your commitment to provide emergency assistance to them since the start of the pandemic. We are very grateful. However, they also need Arlington County to make a long-term commitment to support them with affordable, sustainable housing as they work to rebuild their lives. We all need to know that there will be housing that is affordable for everyone in the future. So I ask you in the fiscal 2022 budget to 1, significantly increase the funding for the housing grants program, and 2, fund the affordable housing investment to at least the level of current year using one-time funding as needed. It is even more important now to put our county on a sustainable path towards ensuring that whatever their income level, families who contribute to our community will have the opportunity to live here and to live in safe, healthy homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Wells, and thank you for your service to our community on hunger.
Our next speaker is John Lau, followed by Michelle Chan.
Mr. Lau.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I ask that you fully fund the Virginia Cooperative Extension, and I'm glad to hear that full funding will be restored in the manager's recommendation. The benefits that Arlington receives from the Virginia Cooperative Extension's programs are far greater than the value of the funds that Arlington provides for the extension. The benefits are 11 or more times greater than the current budget. Cutting the $64,000 budget in half would have devastated the program, this year or this coming year and for the long term. The benefits are shared amongst the thousands of residents who participate in the Extension's family programs and by the community at large through the environmental and social impacts informed and led by the Extension's experts and technical staff. The staff organize Arlington's residents to manage stormwater, tree canopy, invasive plants, pollinators, pests, and wild animals. Its programs are even more important now because they promote and facilitate getting children and adults outdoors, socializing safely, learning about health, and engaging in civic duty. Please do fund the program at current levels and going forward. And thank you again. Have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Lau, for your time and testimony.
Our next speaker is Michelle Chan, followed by Lynn Borton.
Ms. Chan.
Hi, everyone. So you guys know me as Michelle or Mitch. You guys know that I work with ACE and I work with a lot of the Asian and Asian American community members in Arlington. We've already shared some of our concerns and also proposals with the board members already, but I wanted to take this moment to share it again. You know that we've been asking Arlington County to make appropriate changes to the housing grants program. We need Arlington County to expand the rent requirements to match the actual rent costs in Arlington. Currently, the program asks that people find apartments under a certain rent requirement. This is quite impossible because the average median cost of rent is much higher. We're asking that Arlington County match the actual cost of rent. Expanding this requirement would cost about, $8 million, but we wanted to hop on this call just to urge Arlington County to commit to making Arlington more affordable for working class community members. We do know that there's a one-time $17.5 million COVID contingency fund that has yet to be allocated. We want Arlington County to allocate a portion of this fund to the housing grants program, especially since the current program does not address the problem that is in place to aid, and we want to make sure that the program actually helps our community members who need these changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chan.
Our next speaker is Lynn Borton, followed by Audrey Clement.
Ms. Borton.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to associate myself with Kimmy Reed's enthusiastic and eloquent support of Arlington Independent Media. When I stepped in as president of the AIM board last year, you all were abundantly clear about the need for AIM to focus and adopt a more business mindset. And you wanted to see a strategic commitment and capacity for containing costs and generating revenue, which we have managed to do in a meaningful way. The year has illuminated AIM's contributions to the county priorities, including locally produced independent media, enabling community dialogue, providing capacity building assets for Arlington's many and important nonprofits, and building vital helping support those vital service providers and helping them thrive, and amplifying underserved voices in the community. And through our variety of media platforms, we promote digital equity and offer multiple channels for emergency preparedness and communication. We ask that you approve the updated manager's budget recommendations, reinstating AIM's funding, including the 5% reduction we've long anticipated. We have demonstrated our determination and ability to meet and offset that recurring reduction. Finally, I want to acknowledge and thank the manager and county staff who have provided candid and sometimes challenging, but always constructive counsel that has proved invaluable in helping us navigate the year. And I was glad to see that the manager's third quarter review includes a proposed raise for those hardworking folks. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Borton.
Our next speaker is Audrey Clement, followed by Asil Alborno.
Ms. Clement.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Welcome, members of the board and the county manager. I'm Audrey Clement, independent candidate for county board. The fiscal year 22 budget strikes me as aspirational rather than sensible. It proposes to balance the budget and fund a host of new initiatives in a COVID economy with revenues essentially flat. The budget achieves this by axing core services and filling in the gaps with reserve funds. Among the new initiatives proposed are raising the base minimum wage to $17 per hour, extending parental leave from 6 to 8 weeks, increasing dependent care and tuition reimbursement and live where you work grants, and instituting Juneteenth Day as a new paid holiday. While these initiatives conform with the county's so-called equity agenda, they come at a price. 20 vacant police and sheriff department positions will be gutted. A host of other police-related positions will be frozen. Of particular concern are reductions in the 911 call center. These draconian public safety cuts send a message to those who question whether they actually serve the public interest. If you've got a problem with the county's priorities, then you're a candidate for its new deprogramming initiative. Another area of concern is the increase in the stormwater tax rate by 38%, which comes on top of a stormwater bond issue of $51 million approved by the voters in November 2020. Regarding this increase, the voters should realize that when they approve every bond measure in sight, their taxes will go up to pay for those bonds. The county should acknowledge that McMansions built to the curb generate more runoff. A far less expensive way to mitigate runoff than expanding stormwater facilities is to revisit the setback provisions of the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clement.
Our next speaker is Asil Alborno, followed by David Human.
Hello, my name is Asil Alborno. I've been living in Arlington for the past 16 years. I have 2 children that attend Arlington Public Schools, and both my husband and I work in organizations that are headquartered in Arlington. This county also houses our closest family and friends, and if it weren't for affordable housing, they wouldn't be able to continue living here. Affordable housing makes it possible to be a substitute teacher or a salesman or a newly arrived immigrant and live in the county that you work. My husband and I lived in market affordable housing for our first 7 years. But the reality is that we also know many families that couldn't keep up with the rising cost of living in Arlington, did not have access to affordable housing, and had to leave the county completely. I work for the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, and I know firsthand that our wait lists are long and many families have to be turned away. If we want this county to be an inclusive, diverse, and equitable place to live, then we must make it a priority to provide more money in our county budget for affordable housing now and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alborno.
Okay, our next speaker is David Human, followed by Rachel Waldstein. And I'm not sure if David Human is on the line, but we will give a moment.
Mr. Human? Okay, we'll go on to the next speaker.
Rachel Waldstein, followed by Keisha Gray.
Hello, my name is Rachel Waldstein, and I'd like to speak in support of missing middle housing. I have lived in Arlington off and on for more than 30 years. For the first decade, I lived mostly with roommates. And in 2000, when I finally got a decent job and I wanted to buy, I couldn't afford to buy in Arlington, so I had to move out of the community. Only when I got married and we had 2 very good salaries could we afford to come back and buy a modest home that would now be considered missing middle housing. We wanted to live here for many of the same reasons others do: great schools and great county services, restaurants and entertainment, and plenty of green space. We live in the Williamsburg area of North Arlington. We love our neighborhood, but there is no diversity here to speak of. In fact, we sent our son to middle school outside our neighborhood in large part so that he would be exposed to kids of other races, cultural backgrounds, and income levels. I would like to see a more diverse and inclusive neighborhoods throughout Arlington. At a recent listening tour, I heard some complain that rental houses in an area of single-family homes and multiple houses would ruin the character of the area. Well, there are rental homes on either side of mine, and the neighborhood is thriving. Others say affordable and missing middle housing should be concentrated on the main arteries and near commercial areas. I believe that's essentially segregation, limiting the options of people of modest income who want the same kind of life we want. The houses going up constantly all around me are enormous and could easily be built instead as duplexes or even triplexes without changing the footprint of the structures. More disturbing to the neighborhood are the increasing numbers of luxury income townhomes being built all the way to the street and leaving no greenery whatsoever. Diversity enriches us all. We need to act now to ensure home ownership in Arlington is accessible to people of modest as well as lower income. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goldstein.
Our next speaker is Keisha Gray, followed by Mason Bernard.
Hello, my name is Kaisha Gray, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, otherwise known as APA. Tonight, my representation speaks to the continued advocacy for affordable housing throughout Arlington County. Many Arlington residents continue to be priced out of adequate and sustainable affordable housing throughout the county. And as the demand continues to exceed current supply, it is pertinent that we do all we can to develop and preserve affordable housing that meets the growing needs of its county's residents. As a millennial and resident of Arlington County, it has become increasingly difficult to obtain housing that is affordable and adequate. Therefore, I believe that it is critical that the budget ensure more funds are allocated to meet the housing needs Arlington residents have, especially during a time where households are plagued by the adverse impacts of COVID-19. I hope that the urgency to improve the affordable housing supply has been conveyed through my message, and I thank you and appreciate the continued consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Okay, Mason Bernard is our next speaker, and I do not believe Mason Bernard is here. Just want to make sure. Followed by Ann Vorderbergy. And we will move on. I do not believe
Hi.
Mason is.
Ms. Vorderberg.
Hello. I'm Ann Vorderberg, and I'm with the Arlington Community Foundation. As you know, the Foundation's shared prosperity work focuses on our very lowest income neighbors in the spirit of a more economically inclusive and equitable Arlington. Last year, the county released an updated housing needs analysis, and the data in it, which is pre-COVID, identified just over 8,000 renter households earning less than 30% of our AMI, which is now about $38,000 for a household of 4. There are fewer than 50 committed affordable units dedicated to these 8,000 households. Childcare and healthcare aides, food service and construction workers, office cleaners, and also seniors and others on fixed incomes. Only half of them are receiving subsidies for more affordable rent. So that leaves almost 4,000 extremely low-income households in units they cannot afford. We believe this is by far the largest unmet need in Arlington. That the county includes some 30% AMI units in all new AHIP-funded projects, and also to please seek opportunities to transition existing 60% units to lower AMI levels using AHIP within existing CAFs. And to housing grants, we ask you to consider updating the percent of the income paid toward rent from the current 40% down to 30% of income, such as used in Section 8. If housing burden is defined as paying more than 30% of one's income toward rent, we'd expect the county's own program to give these very low income recipients enough cushion to cover other important and often unpredictable expenses. And finally, we urge you, as we did last year, to eligibility for housing grants to cover additional groups who are currently unable to receive. Thank you all so much for your consideration and for the heavy load that you've carried on our behalf over the past year.
Thank you, Ms. Vorderberg.
Our next speaker is Carlos Velasquez, followed by John Shushan.
Mr. Velasquez.
Good evening. I'm Carlos Velasquez. I'm on the board of the trustees for Arlington Community Foundation, an active member of the Commission on Aging. I want to thank you for all the work you have done the past year to keep Arlingtonians in their homes. The increased emergency housing assistance you have provided, mainly through COVID contingency assistance, has helped prevent many low-income families and individuals from leaving Arlington and has helped keep food and on the table and utilities paid. As you know, the Foundation's focus through our shared prosperity work is on the lowest income households in Arlington, those who are most at risk. And they were at risk long before the pandemic. Low income households are just one crisis away from being homeless. An illness, a car repair, loss of childcare can completely impact a whole family and, in fact, a community. Last year, we advocated for a doubling of emergency rent, stabilization funding, and the need is not going away. We welcome the inclusion of an enhanced level of funding for emergency rental assistance as part of the budget proposal. We also believe that flexibility added to this program during COVID should be retained permanently. This includes the longer periods of time that households can receive funds, as well as the higher amounts available per household. These flexibilities should be continued after the pandemic to allow a more realistic runway for residents to resolve delinquencies and develop a near-term financial plan to recover from their personal crisis. Short-term supports and high limits on the amounts of support are often not enough to allow for stabilized steps to take when households are in a crisis. I want to take a moment to thank you for all the hard work you're doing for the county, and I applaud all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Velasquez.
Our next speaker is John Shushan, followed by Charles Head.
Mr. Shushan.
Thank you, Chairman DeFerrante, members of the County Board, and Mr. Schwartz for allowing me to speak to you this evening. As we know, this past year has been a difficult one. We've had to endure a global pandemic. We've watched shutdowns resulting in millions of people who have lost their jobs, many within the retail, construction, and hospitality industries that employ a large number of our poorest members of our community. Several years ago, Christian Dorsey and I, along with many others, participated in the Shared Prosperity Roundtable that identified strategies to help the neediest amongst us. At that time, we saw Arlington as being at a crossroads that required some new thinking, some creative partnerships to serve households that most need, specifically those targeted at 30% of AMI and below. And the pandemic has only exacerbated the challenges of these households. As a result, the County Board needs to begin now to plan for how it will structurally support these families once federal and state emergency fundings dissipate later this year. Therefore, tonight, I appeal to Arlington's leadership to become creative and find the funds. So tonight, I ask the county to have a unique opportunity, take advantage of this opportunity to inspire us all by prioritizing its budgeting process. And I implore you to set aside the essential funds for supporting an increase in AS funding to approximately $18.7 million. As tonight, I speak to you on behalf of those who are in need of this assistance and can't find the voice to ask you themselves. With your leadership, I know we can solicit more support from the private sector, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, if the county will lead by example. I will continue to try to do my part as I have financially supported the Shared Prosperity initiatives with affordable housing projects, assistance to reduce homelessness, and to provide rental subsidies. I am guided by my faith in the words of St. Augustine that says, find out what God has given you, take from what you need, for the rest is needed by others. And I thank you very much for your time and for all that you do for our community.
Thank you, Mr. Shushan.
Our next speaker is Charles Head, followed by Claudia Delgadillo.
Mr. Head.
Thank you, Mr. DeFerrante. I'm here representing Arl Fiber, and we are urging the board to fund a study of the feasibility of establishing a broadband authority and a municipal optical fiber broadband network to provide fast, reliable, upgradable, competitively priced internet service to homes and businesses in Arlington. This study needs to address the following: establishment of a broadband network owned by Arlington County, elimination of the digital divide in Arlington. In particular, we need to find an approach that does not leave less affluent sectors of Arlington with, at best, inferior dead-end wireless connections, while only more affluent sectors have true broadband connectivity that is upgradable to meet future demands. It needs to use this network, find a means of using the network to eliminate the de facto internet monopoly in Arlington. The study needs to find ways of lowering the cost of internet access in Arlington. The study also needs to identify the kind of licensing agreement currently in use elsewhere to successfully do business over the internet, to replace Arlington's current licensing agreement, which has only blocked internet commerce using Connect Arlington. The goal of the study should be to establish Arlington as a city that recognizes the overwhelming advantages of broadband internet over optical fiber and offer an environment that will nurture businesses who will prosper by using such technology. Thank you very much for listening to these comments.
Thank you, Mr. Head.
Our next speaker is Claudia Delgadillo, followed by Ashinkai Debak.
Ms. Delgadillo.
Good evening. I have lived in Arlington with my family for 25 years. I teach in Claremont's Spanish immersion program. This is not my first time standing before the board, the county board. 5 years ago, I was here with Voice and Mi Voz Cuenta. The Affordable Housing Master Plan was under consideration. The room was crowded. People from all walks of life testified about their housing problems. Our words were so moving that some opponents decided not to speak that day. The plan passed 5-0. Some things have changed since that day. The board looks different, but some things have remained the same. Here I am with Voice speaking about housing again. Here I am concerned about students who have to move out of Arlington every year. Concerned about families spending more than 40% or 50% of their income just on rent. Concerned about low wage earners who are essential to our community yet cannot afford to live here. We are behind in the master plan's goals. The third largest company in the world has moved here. The pandemic is making inequities worse for our families of color. Voice and I are asking you right now in this budget to increase the funding for grants, increase the affordable housing investment funds to at least the level of the current year. We ask you with this budget to show the community you're committed to affordable housing master plan and Arlington's vision to be a diverse, inclusive community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delgadillo.
Our next speaker is Ashinkai Debak, which I do not believe Ashinkai Debak is with us. Just call quickly.
Good evening, everyone. You hear me?
Yes, is it Ms.
Yes,
Debak?
I am here on behalf of Mr. Ashinkai Debak. So please allow me to present to you his testimony.
Sure.
Mr. Ashinkai is our client. I'm a self-sufficiency program coordinator at the Ethiopian Community Development Council. So he was registered to speak, but could not make it for some unforeseen reason. So please allow me to read his letter of testimony as he sent to us to present it to you. Dear Arlington County Board members, my name is Ashinkai Debak, a 64 years old Arlington resident. My wife and I came to the United States of America through family reunification about 3 years ago. After staying for about a year with our daughter, we wanted to be a contributing member instead of being a burden to the family. It was by then that we heard about the employment service that ACDC renders to the community. Honestly, neither my wife nor I was sure that we could be able to secure a job here in the US, as there were so many barriers, including language fluency and social cultural differences. To my surprise, it took only a couple of months to get one. My wife also got employed after a few more months. Since then, we became economically independent from our daughter to the extent of being able to rent our own house. 6 months later, the pandemic happened and we both lost our jobs. We were so frustrated as we didn't know what to do, but we knew where to go. So we reached out to ACDC for assistance. The agent who assisted us to get a job also helped us to apply for unemployment insurance. Not only that, she also helped us get rental and grocery gift card assistance. Today, we also secure a subsidized housing through ACDC's referral, and I am also in the process of returning back to my job. We cannot thank enough the team for their tireless assistance throughout our journey towards becoming self-sufficient. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to request to continue supporting ACDC and appreciate all the work they have been doing to assist vulnerable parts of the community like us who would otherwise be left behind. Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Next speaker.
Okay. I'm sorry. Our next speaker is David Libson, followed by Stuart Davis.
Mr. Liebson.
Yes, can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Good evening. My name is Dave Liebson. I think most of you know I've been involved in affordable housing and homelessness in Arlington for some time. I came to speak on that important the importance of those programs, and I think others before me have done it better than I can. I particularly liked Claudia Delgadillo's comments just a moment ago. I do want to urge the increased funding for housing grants and permanent supportive housing that was not mentioned. Both are very critical in this time, and the first thing beyond the virus itself that those who have lost income worry about is making rent. So we must take care of that. I came on the end of the discussion with the manager earlier about the funding that might be freed up from the 21 because of the American CARES Act, and I can't urge strongly enough that the programs that were deferred in the 21 budget, that those funds be used for things like affordable housing and others that were deferred in the budget. You know, we're the affordable housing master plan that has been mentioned. We're actually falling behind rather than making progress, and so we really have to step up if meeting those goals means anything at all. Lastly, I really want to applaud DHS and CPHD staff for the work they've been doing during all this time. They really have, and I say staff, not just the county staff, but the staff of ASPAN and Doorways and Bridges and all the organizations that have been involved in these programs, including APA and HC as well. And I urge the county in next year's budget in preparation to ask the manager to look at staffing levels. You know, permanent, I always say it's permanent supportive housing, and permanent supportive housing won't work without the support that goes with it. And so I worry that we may, so please for expanding, but I worry that we may be taxing staff beyond their capabilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Liebson.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Stuart Davis, followed by
Davis.
Kelly Fado. And Stuart Davis may not be in the room. I just want to call to make sure. Okay, I think we can go ahead and move on. Kelly Fado, followed by Kathleen Summers. Just a reminder to everyone to mute your line.
Ms. Fado. Are you there, Ms. Fado? Kelly Fado.
Kelly Fado should be with us. Oh, I'm sorry. I do not believe Kelly is with us. Well, let's move on to Kathleen Summers, followed by Jane Green.
Ms. Summers.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks. This is Kate Summers, and I want to start by thanking the board for their support to the library over the years. I'm speaking tonight in support of our amazing public library system and the community's strong desire to see every branch reopen as safely and quickly as possible. Arlington library branches have been shuttered for throughout this pandemic, really, and while staff have worked tirelessly to support library patrons through ebooks, virtual programs, and grab-and-go services, we need to be looking at ways to expand support to the community during this difficult time, not proposing continued closures at our beloved Cherrydale and Glen Carlin locations. Other markets have managed to reopen their libraries safely. New York City, for example, hit so hard by COVID, has dozens of branches open across all their boroughs. Chicago has employed timed entries, strict rules on social distancing. San Francisco has actually opened multiple sites and made use of bookmobiles, something that the Friends of the Library recently funded. Even more locally, Washington, D.C. is reopening branches with limited capacity. We think that the board should direct more support and funding toward a robust library reopening plan. The community needs our important library systems. After the year we've all had, cutting the Cherrydale and Glencarland locations should not even be an option. And I hope that the board moves quickly to fully fund the library and ensure every single branch opens as quickly as possible. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Summers.
Our next speaker is Jane Green, followed by Detta Kissel.
Ms. Green.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can. You're a little soft, but
I can try something else. Can you hear me now?
we can. That's better.
So for letting me speak, and thank you for all the work you've done over the past year. As you prioritize a budget that addresses immediate concerns, we can't ignore the need to invest in longer-term affordable housing solutions. First, we need to continue to increase the supply of committed affordable housing by funding the Affordable Housing Investment Fund to at least $18.7 million. Market rate affordable housing and apartments will continue to move out of reach for low-income families, but building now or building in the next few years will help address supply challenges in Arlington that we'll continue to face. We have a lot of catching up to do to meet the Affordable Housing Master Plan's goals. Second, we need an easy, free way to increase the supply of market rate attainable housing for Arlington families. We can get more housing to meet our growing population and fit the needs of today's households with changes to zoning that will allow duplexes, small apartments, or condos or other missing middle types of housing. This is an eminently attainable future, and it doesn't cost the county a dime. Montgomery County, Berkeley, Portland, Sacramento, Bozeman, Montana are some of the places that have or are very close to eliminating exclusionary zoning in order to allow more market rate housing that is attainable for middle income families. Arlington should join this list. I'm asking that you restore the planning capacity within the CHPD, specifically the principal planner position that is slated to go under a temporary hiring freeze. We need a person with experience and leadership to develop and implement flexible zoning regulation that can expand supply at a lower price point throughout the county. Limited capacity within the planning division means opportunities for multifamily, mixed income, walkable housing are lost out. We can't afford delays. Improving zoning now will make the most of our housing expenditures for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
Our next speaker is Detta Kissel, followed by Claire Christian.
Ms. Kissel.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. We've heard a lot tonight about affordable housing, and I want to echo those comments, but focus my comments on home ownership. Specifically, I'm asking you to support the Moderate Income Purchase Assistance Program, MyPath, a program that lends money at favorable terms to first-time homebuyers of moderate income, allowing them to participate in the benefits of equity ownership. Since this is a loan, the original amounts lent are returned to the county with an additional amount, a portion of appreciation. It's a win-win. The county's most recent housing needs analysis notes the effect of the rising cost of home ownership on diversity, including loss of prime working age adults and households earning less than 120% of AMI, and calls it a threat to long-term community and economic stability. MyPath can help these minority, young, and moderate income residents participate in the #1 way to accumulate generational wealth. With down payment and closing cost assistance, it's the only way for lower income households to overcome the hurdles toward homeownership. This well-crafted program has been funded at a level of only $419,000 after receiving no additional funding in fiscal year 2021. I ask the county board to consider increasing that amount in the current budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kissel.
Okay, we will try for Claire Christian, although I do not believe Claire Christian is with us. We'll try quickly.
Ms. Christian?
I don't think Claire can make it, but she's also on the board of the library and wanted to voice her support, as did Kelly Fado. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Herschel Cantor, followed by Nancy White.
Mr. Cantor.
I'm Herschel Cantor, a 57-year resident of Arlington County. At some point in the early 20th century, some visionary said, someday every home will have an indoor toilet with the waste carried to a central location and treated there. In the 1930s, the New Deal included a vision of electricity in every home. And Arlington has NRECA, the national association that grew out of that program. In both cases, the benefits to society of universality were clear and the vision was achieved. Now the vision is universal broadband. Again, the benefits to society of universality are clear. At some point in the future, every home, every apartment house, and every office building in Arlington will be connected with reliable, high-speed, affordable, state-of-the-art broadband. Achieving that vision is a necessity for a world-class community. My ask for the budget is that funds be included to do a study to see what it would take to realize the vision sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. And we're ready for our next speaker.
Okay.
I think.
We'll go on to Nancy White, followed by Bob Cambridge.
Ms. White.
Good evening, members of the County Board and staff. I'm Nancy White, President of Arlington Free Clinic, and I'm speaking tonight to ask you to consider support in the upcoming budget to explore the best ways to support affordable broadband connections for Arlingtonians. As a provider of free healthcare services for Arlington's safety net, Arlington Free Clinic has seen firsthand the tremendous gap in digital equity that exists in our community. During this pandemic, AFC has managed to provide thousands of telehealth visits with our patients, relying almost entirely upon poor connection from cell phone data plans paid for by our patients. These shaky connections frequently lead to dropped calls and poor call quality, with a potential impact on healthcare decision-making and frustrations for all. When the pandemic's behind us, the need will not go away. If anything, the pandemic has emphasized how critical internet connection is for the work of Arlington's nonprofit organizations. For example, our low-income neighbors spend way too much of their time trying to sign up for services such as rent assistance and healthcare by taking their paperwork and waiting in waiting rooms in government offices and nonprofit organizations, often to learn that they're in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong paperwork. A public internet option would give them the same privilege that my family and I enjoy enrolling for services online. We must have better ways to communicate with and serve our residents. Broadband is an essential infrastructure like electricity and water. It's important that the public sector act to ensure that essential infrastructure reaches all residents and the services that are provided are affordable to all. We should never again find ourselves in the situation that we've been in over the past year, and I thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White.
Our next speaker is Bob Cambridge, followed by John Vistad.
Mr. Cambridge.
Right, I'm trying to unmute the camera and it doesn't want to unmute. Well, I'm Bob Cambridge. I've been in Arlington since '82, actually 3 years before that also. I wanted to talk about the library, and I'm encouraged that the county manager does think that that should be a priority, and of course I agree. Arlington is a wonderful place to live, in part because of facilities like the library. We came here in '82, and the assessments on the house have gone up 5 to 6 times, which means I have the privilege of paying taxes, which are 5 to 6 times as high. And it's worth it. I mean, this is still one heck of a place to be, and things like the library make that difference. So I'll put my vote in for asking you to consider seriously fully getting the libraries back up and running. I want to also thank you because Mary and I have been vaccinated, and while it was not as well organized when we first started, I've seen a massive improvement in the efficiency of your efforts. You folks are doing a good job, and I want that known. Anyway, Cherrydale Library has been, I guess, challenged or threatened several times since we've been here. Please consider funding it and keeping it going. I think the libraries are a very important part of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cambridge.
The next speaker is John Vistad, followed by Shahira Saeed.
Mr. Vistad.
Mr. Chairman, County Board members, can you, okay, there I am. I'm John Vistad, a founding co-chair of the County Audit Committee with former colleague Jay Fizzette, and currently one of its 3 public members. But for today, I speak only for myself in urging that you add a minimum additional $250,000 in resources to the county auditor's budget, which has been flat for 5 years. This manager's proposed budget for the position of roughly $239,000 out of a total county budget approximating $1.4 billion is risky and violates the county board's own charge that governs the county auditor. The charge states that, quote, sufficient funds shall be provided or rather proposed by the county manager after consultation with the audit committee for consideration by the county board to carry out the county auditor's annual audit work plan. Yet such funds have not been proposed by the manager this year, and as is increasingly apparent in retrospect, not since the office was first born in 2015. Moreover, the county manager has never adequately consulted with the full audit committee about what the county auditor needs to perform their annual work plan as intended. Nor has the audit committee, frankly, lived up to its obligation of consulting with the manager on funds proposed. As a result, this office's productivity is suffering. It's released only 4 audits with over a dozen more topics adopted for study, either languishing or failing to launch in the first place. Critical subjects like cross-departmental risk management assessments, capital contracts administration, nonprofit funding, economic development incentive funds, and procurement practices. Please join me in the Arlington County Civic Federation in calling for adequate funding for the independent county auditor and restoring the full-time internal audit position lost 2 years ago. While your authority to directly use American Rescue Plan dollars for this increase may be problematic, Rescue Plan dollars will free up otherwise obligated county funds to allow you to do this. We owe this to Arlington taxpayers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vistad.
Our next speaker is Shahira Saeed, followed by Andrew Schneider.
Ms. Saeed.
Good evening, everyone. I am Shahira, and I work with ACE Collaborative as well, organizing Asian and Asian American working class communities in Arlington County. I wanted to echo the sentiments of what Michelle had mentioned. The Housing Grants Program, although ideal on paper, currently lacks in deliverance of supporting all those who need it. We need a program that helps keep our community to stay in their homes, and the current supply does not meet the actual demand. And moreover, the maximum allowable rent limits set by the county are far from what the reality is and what the residents actually pay monthly in Arlington County. We're asking that the Arlington County match the actual cost of rent in Arlington and expanding the program to an additional $8 million that's required to set and match the limits that the current Arlington residents are paying. So we want to urge the county to commit to making Arlington more affordable for working class community members. And as mentioned, looking into the COVID contingency fund has it's not been allocated, and we want to ask you to be able to allocate a portion of that fund or surplus funds towards the housing grants program. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Saeed.
The next speaker is Andrew Schneider. And then we will go back up to one of our previous speakers at the beginning of the 2 minute.
Sure, Mr. Schneider.
Chairman DeFerrante and members of the board, I'm here to speak about the FY22 budget and our county's commitment to eviction prevention. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the county, led by our county board and the county manager and his team, has remained steadfast in your support and belief that preventing evictions and, more fundamentally, financial catastrophe for Arlington's vulnerable low-income population has been a top priority. On behalf of the thousands of households that Thrive has had the opportunity to serve over the past 14 months, thank you. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I have often remarked that we cannot waste this crisis. We must take what we have learned and continue to learn since March of 2020 and apply them to our actions and our funding choices going forward. What have we learned? We have learned first and foremost that almost always helping families with only 1 to 2 months of rental assistance per year is insufficient in helping families avoid financial catastrophe. Through the county's commitment, federal funding from the various CARES Acts, Thrive has been able to support thousands of families for multiple months, often over 6 months of rental support. Without this commitment, these families, temporarily spared from eviction due to eviction moratoriums, nonetheless would have had no way to pay back their rents and would have been forced to either leave Arlington or be evicted. We have also learned that it is imperative that DHS case managers, Thrive case managers, and the over 30 nonprofit partners that Thrive and the Community Assistance Bureau work with have flexibility and resources to provide financial assistance that covers expenses or household expenses not eligible for federal or state funding. Sometimes a car repair, an electricity bill, or helping pay for a child's funeral, for instance, is only possible due to the local funding provided by the county. As county leadership determines how the county will utilize funding available through the American Recovery Act, I urge you to consider and continue your strong commitment to eviction prevention and financial assistance by committing to extending both the amount of money and time that families can receive assistance. Due to the more stringent restrictions of the federal funding, inevitably we rely on Arlington County taxpayers for their support. Wow, I'm done. I'll wrap it up here just by saying thank you very much, and that we are honored to be a partner in these efforts, and to thank you for the opportunity to serve alongside you as a key part of Arlington's financial safety net.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if we can go back to Nancy Broff, she has been able to join us.
Ms. Broff, thank you for waiting and with us, and go ahead.
Hi, I apologize for not being here on time for the beginning. I was a volunteer at the vaccination clinic today. We were very busy, and when I got home, I was just so hungry I had to eat dinner before I could do anything else. I'm here today to, as several other people have, asked for your support for the Virginia Cooperative Extension Office. I am pleased to hear that the county manager and you are considering putting back the money that you originally were cutting. Under the original proposal to cut the $63,000, we would have lost $150,000 in matching grants, 2 out of 3 of our full-time agent positions, and 2 other part-time staffers. I'm a master food volunteer with the Cooperative Extension, and I have most years, other than last year, I have done more than 100 hours each year as a master food volunteer. I really enjoy doing that, and volunteering is something that's really important to me. I know aging in place is something that Arlington County takes very seriously, and I think one of the most important aspects to being able to successfully age in place is being able to feel that you're continuing to be a contributing member to the community. Volunteering allows us to do that. Providing the kinds of volunteer opportunities that the Virginia Cooperative Extension does through not just the master food volunteers, but also the master gardeners and the master naturalists, the financial volunteers, and the 4-H volunteers really helps many, many members of our community feel that we still, even in our advancing years, let's say, are able to be contributing members to the community. And I really appreciate that. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Broff, for your comments and your volunteering today.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to check back. I do not believe we still have not seen Elizabeth Valente or Mason Bernard, but I just wanted to give it one more chance in case they were having trouble with accessing the meeting.
Nope. And then Mr. Human, I don't think so either.
That is correct.
Okay, Mr. Human, last call. All right, so I think ready for our 3-minute speakers. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
That is correct. So we will go to Bob Carolla, followed by Bernard Byrne.
Mr. Carolla. Mr. Carolla?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm a member of the County Community Services Board and its Mental Health Committee, but I want to emphasize that these are my personal views as a 34-year resident of the county. And I also have a career background of almost 20 years in the mental health care policy field. The budget has an increase for mental health services, and I want to thank you because it's needed. The pandemic's mental health effects are going to be with us for a long time, and long-term brain and neurological effects are already a concern. Virus variants will heighten that, and there is some indication now that psychosis can be both a symptom as well as a result for some people. Despite the difficult challenges of the pandemic, I want to commend the Department of Human Services for making significant progress this past year by prioritizing crisis response and diversion from the criminal justice system. It's a start in building an infrastructure and to some degree greater capacity for the future. But even before the pandemic, Arlington had to run hard to keep up with the need and also national transformation trends. Many pieces are starting to converge, but we need to look to take more steps forward. A strong first episode psychosis program, greater use of peer counselors, and a single navigator for both public and private elements of what is a treacherously fragmented mental health care system. Early intervention requires a focus on youth at risk and not just those who experience first break. 2 years ago, the National Institute of Mental Health launched an early psychosis intervention network to foster collaboration, coordination, and advancements in best practices. Today, it has 8 regional hubs and 101 clinics across 17 states, but Virginia is not a regional hub nor part of one. By statute, federal mental health block grants to states include a 10% set aside for early intervention programs. We need to address Arlington's immediate first episode needs, but for the future, we should be considering the feasibility for cost sharing with Fairfax County and other payers and providers for multiple satellite systems. I know that's a lot to digest, but I'd like to see Arlington move ahead of the curve rather than running hard just to keep up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corolla.
Our next speaker is Bernard Byrne, followed by Joan McIntyre.
Mr. Byrne.
Yes, hello again. Most people here are talking about how they want to increase expenditures for their own particular causes. I'm here to tell you where some places should be reduced to help balance the budget or whatever to reduce taxes. Number one, if you look at page 605, you'll see a park maintenance and park management and maintenance budget and construction budget for $10 million. But there's no further breakdown on this. But anyway, within that budget, $10 million is money for the mowers. Now, the county mowers are basically, most of them are just mowing the grass where grass shouldn't be, which could be natural areas. Even in areas near trails, which are supposed to be only several feet wide, they're mowing, 10, 15 feet from the trails. There are whole areas of unused mowed lawns. There seems to no way of getting rid of this whole thing except by cutting the mowing budget and saving some money. So if you have to go look on that thing on page 605 and see, ask the county manager how much it costs to reduce, how much they can gain by reducing the mowing budget, reduce by about 50%. That will help restore natural areas. It can do more than for the county's natural areas than anything you can do by putting money into that. So look at that very carefully. I say this every year, it's a waste of money and a misuse, actually. If they do save any money from this, you could think about doing something about maybe diminishing the reduction level of temporary parks and natural resources people. There's a reduction there proposing of $355,000. Well, these, to reduce the temporary workers at parks and natural resources, you have a lot of people using the park now with COVID. This is not the time to reduce that budget. These temporary workers, yes, some aren't needed now because of COVID, but probably more, because so many people are using the parks, probably more are needed. So if you do save any money, and you're able to save any money, just allocate it for that. The other big thing is where you can save your money. Reduce the money to the racial equity program. This program, there is no evidence that racial equity is caused there's any racial inequities in this county except for those related to economic. You're spending money on various things like changing park names and changing place names and changing street names and things like the Volgo, which costs money. And these are probably opposed by most people in the county and may lead to backlashes. You have passed an equity resolution which said equity in many aspects, income, everything else, but the county manager only put the money into racial equity. This is inequitable, plain and simple, for the people who aren't for those races. A day off for Juneteenth Day, when Juneteenth had nothing to do with Arlington. These are the wastes of money.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Next speaker.
Okay, our next speaker, Mr. Byrne, if you can mute your line and turn your camera off, thank you. Our next speaker is Joan McIntyre, followed by Michelle Winters.
Ms. McIntyre.
Good evening. I'm Joan McIntyre, speaking on behalf of the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission. C2E2 greatly appreciates the huge challenge the county faces in dealing with the continuing fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, and commends the county manager's efforts to provide vital services to residents and businesses impacted by the pandemic. Nevertheless, addressing the climate crisis and multiple other environmental challenges remains an urgent issue that cannot be ignored. Under the bridge budget, C2E2 sees an opportunity for the county to set the stage for a rapid adoption of ambitious programs and policies needed to achieve the county's goals for renewable energy and carbon neutrality, better incorporate trees, green spaces, and natural areas into our urban suburban environment, and reduce the climate and environmental impacts of excess waste generation. As a first step, we urge the county board to initiate the process of creating a chief climate change and sustainability position to coordinate government-wide efforts to address climate and other environmental goals. As an interim measure, a current senior manager can take on the portfolio temporarily. We recommend that the county budget board give a high priority to increasing the proposed FY22 budget for the air team. Even before the pandemic, the air budget and staff had been cut, and the proposed budget would cut a further 11% at a time when these resources are crucial to ensuring a robust implementation roadmap and to position the county to aggressively address climate change as revenues rebound and funding opportunities from the federal and state governments materialize. County staff should launch a comprehensive process in FY22 to create a zero waste master plan to fulfill commitments made by the county board in its 2015 zero waste resolution. While the Forestry and Natural Resources Master Plan, now under development, should offer a roadmap to protecting and expanding our tree canopy, open spaces, and natural resources, the county can prioritize funding for an additional forester and enhanced maintenance of the tree canopy, and supporting efforts to assess and manage deer overpopulation in our natural areas as the budget situation improves. Finally, C2E2 urges the county board to restore funding to the Virginia Cooperative Extension Program and to the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, which is actually a good tool in helping us preserve our natural resources. As Arlington rebounds from the hardships of the last year, the county board has an opportunity to shift its priorities to addressing the climate crisis and other environmental challenges, and to ensure a more resilient, vibrant, and equitable community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McIntyre.
Our next speaker is Michelle Winters, followed by Julie Lee.
Ms. Winters.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Michelle Winters, Executive Director of the Alliance for Housing Solutions. Over the past year, we've become more aware than ever how vitally important a safe and affordable place to call home can be. Today, a home is not only where we rest our heads at night, but it is also where children receive much of their education, and many adults either work or take refuge from the dangers outside. AHS has 5 main asks related to the budget this year. You've heard a bit about each of them, and I will summarize them here for you. First, the county should update the housing grants program for a post-COVID environment. Now is an excellent time to not only invest further in the housing grants program as you've proposed, but to make sure that we emerge from COVID having learned as much as we can about how this program should be supporting Arlington residents moving forward. Second, for eviction prevention, the county should retain flexibility added during COVID. We have learned during this pandemic, during the pandemic response, that the flexibility within the details of this program can go a long way towards keeping people housed, as you heard Andrew and others say. Third, the county should increase investment and realign income levels served by the Affordable Housing Investment Fund. The manager's proposal slashes the AHIF allocation to less than $9 million. In early 2020, we were actually advocating for $25 million allocation to AHIF, which we still believe is warranted. And looking back at the FY21 budget proposal, the county manager had proposed AHIF at a level of $18.7 million. This should be the goal for the coming year's budget. Furthermore, recent data made available by the county's housing needs analysis calls attention to the dramatic mismatch between the income levels of Arlington's households and the affordability level of committed affordable units in the county. And we believe this makes a strong case for greater investment in units at the 30% of AMI level. Fourth, Arlington should strengthen the MyPAP homeownership program, which has been minimal for years and is expected to only serve 4 households per year with current funding levels. The small size really calls into question whether this program is substantial enough to have an impact. The FY22 budget year provides an opportunity to serve additional households before prices continue to rise as the economy recovers. Fifth, we support staff and consulting capacity for our housing priorities, which is really important to make sure policies like the Housing Arlington Initiative and other programs to help achieve the Affordable Housing Master Plan, such as fair housing and stewardship of our CAF portfolio, are well implemented and set the county and, most importantly, our residents up for success. And then finally, since I have 10 seconds, I'd like to put some support behind the solutions mentioned for eliminating the digital divide in Arlington, which impacts many of the same residents served by affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winters.
Our next speaker is Julie Lee, followed by Cindy Nelson.
Ms. Lee.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. Hi. The Glen Carlin Citizens Association contends that the reasons to reopen Glen Carlin Library now are more compelling than ever, and a comprehensive view of Glen Carlin Library services is needed to understand the library's community contribution. The county manager's statistics show that before the pandemic, program attendance at the library increased from 3,700 in fiscal year 2019 to 5,600 in fiscal year 2020, an astounding 49% increase in growth in large part to the children's librarian services. With Glen Carlin Library's use growing, its influence expanding, its necessity is even more obvious. All of our school children have suffered during this time of remote learning. As they return to the classroom, they will need additional resources to catch up, and some students more than others. It's essential to use the racial equity lens to evaluate and determine which libraries to reopen. Carlin Springs Elementary School has 68% English learners, the highest in the county by more than 10%, and they have 81% free and reduced lunch students, more than at 9 schools in North Arlington combined. Kenmore Middle School has the highest percentage of English learners and free and reduced lunch students of the middle schools. We cannot ignore these numbers. There is no doubt about the important role that Glen Carlin Library plays for Carlin Springs Elementary, Kenmore Middle School, and Campbell Elementary, all 3 schools within a short walking distance. The library is a necessary after-school destination heavily utilized by students from these schools. Many of these students do not have access to these resources at home. The library's proximity to the schools promotes for collaboration with the schools, programs, and libraries. Glen Carlin Library serves the 22204 zip code, where the percentage of Black and Hispanic populations is twice that of Arlington as a whole. The library is critically located to support the underserved schools and underserved communities who so desperately need its resources as Arlington recovers from the pandemic. 2 years ago, the county manager incorrectly described Glen Carlin Library as the most geographically isolated library branch, servicing a relatively small number of nearby residents. We believe that rather than being isolated, Glen Carlin Library is a resource used well beyond the immediate Glen Carlin neighborhood, and the GCA strongly objects to delaying the availability of these library resources that are so highly valued, well utilized, and desperately needed. And we urge the county board to make this critical community resource available as soon as possible to the Arlington residents who need it most. Fund the full reopening of Glen Carlin Library at the same time as other branches are reopened. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Our next speaker is Cindy Nelson, followed by Scott Pedowitz.
Yes, sir. Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Cindy Nelson, and I've resided in Arlington for a couple of decades. Thank you for allowing us to provide input this evening. I wanted to express my concern, please, with a few issues in the proposed budget. The first issue is regarding the stormwater infrastructure issue in Arlington, which is who is in turn proposing a tax hike for homeowners. I don't agree with this increase. In the last decade, stormwater flooding problems have been brought to Arlington's attention on several occasions, and Arlington appears to have put this issue on the back burner for a long time. Meanwhile, Arlington has approved one development building project after another. This overdevelopment has contributed to the stormwater flooding issue. Homeowners with normal-sized homes did not cause the flooding stormwater problems, and homeowners should not be footing the bill and higher taxes to fix this problem. Arlington already received $51 million in a bond last fall for stormwater. I don't understand why there is now a proposal for additional stormwater fees when Arlington has $51 million in its pocket. Arlington County needs to find another way to find funds for this issue. In addition, don't forget that we are in a pandemic, and homeowners have also been hit in their pockets. Homeowners are clinging onto their homes by using savings and home equity loans to make up for job losses. So Arlington should not automatically assume that because you have a home that you haven't lost an income source. Penalizing homeowners is not right. If anything, homeowners should be receiving a tax break during the pandemic. My second issue is that Arlington is continuing to allow overdevelopment. This should be frozen, especially as I mentioned regarding the flooding stormwater issue. But there is also another issue. If you drive around Arlington, there's so much leased space everywhere, just empty floor space and empty buildings. I don't understand why Arlington is allowing so much new development while so much space is vacant. This seems counterintuitive and doesn't make any sense. An assessment of empty county space should be assessed and prioritized rather than building more buildings with even more empty space. I understand that a $17 minimum wage and increased benefits have also been proposed for county employees. I strongly disagree with this. First, Arlington will be essentially paying $17 to all workers, especially concerning our wages to those workers with minimal education and no experience. Arlington should also be cutting back on salary wages. Raising wages at a time like this is a slap in the face to so many who don't even have jobs. I am so shocked and embarrassed as an Arlingtonian that this was even proposed, especially in the time of a pandemic. This increased difference in minimum wage money and benefits that have been proposed should go into job search programs to assist so many who are now jobless. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. You may just want to note that on Thursday, we will have a discussion of the tax rate. And you may want to listen in. You also would have a right to speak then as well. But
yes, sir. Thank you.
Sure, your comments also touched on the budget, so we were happy to hear them. Thank you. Next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker is Scott Pedowitz, followed by Jill Barker.
Mr. Pedowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I am Scott Pedowitz, the Government Affairs Director at the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. First, I would like to give voice to the request that we have made in our letters on the fiscal year 2022 budget, that you restore Arlington Convention and Visitor Services budget to its fiscal 2021 level, and to unfreeze a principal planner position in the Department of Community Planning, Housing, and Development. Tourism promotion and planning have immediate impact for the many Arlingtonians who work in hospitality or development, and our investments in Arlington County's future real estate and transient occupancy tax revenues. You may also wish to consider restoring these departments to their pre-pandemic levels based on fiscal 2019 funding, as the fiscal outlook for 2022 is improved by the passage of the American Rescue Plan. Our entire community will focus on the lingering effects of the pandemic and on our recovery in fiscal 2022. I am confident that Arlington will use all available tools to meet this challenge. One vitally important tool will be financial grants for Arlington businesses. Following on the Chamber's letter from this afternoon, I encourage Arlington County to establish a direct grant program for local businesses. Arlington businesses have cited access to capital as their most critical need, being selected in surveys by 3 times as many respondents as other support options. Grants provide the greatest benefit because recipients have flexibility to apply them to their specific needs, whether businesses use funds directly to make payroll or for purchases that allow their employees to work safely. The end result is preserving jobs and hiring back for positions lost in the past year. I spoke earlier of supporting our hospitality sector. Hotels can use grants to ensure that they are staffed to receive guests as Americans resume traveling, using those initial guest revenues to expand operations as travel grows, and so on, until occupancy returns to pre-pandemic levels. Neighboring jurisdictions have seeded this virtual cycle. Arlington should as well. Businesses across sectors want to reduce contact between employees and customers, but need to pay upfront for the equipment to make it possible. For example, fitness providers want to invest in technology to provide patrons with more options to be active whilst maintaining their distance. The facility and training jobs lost in the past year will return with this safe activity. Now, the list of possible grant funding uses goes on, but my time with you this evening does not. So the county's ultimate investment from business grants is the livelihood and opportunities for entrepreneurs and especially employees that will result. And so we encourage Arlington to apply its business-focused coronavirus funding to direct grants, the most impactful business support option available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pedowitz.
Our next speaker is Jill Barker, followed by Chris Raines.
Ms. Barker.
Good evening. Excuse me. I'm Jill Barker, Chair of the Eco Action Arlington Board, on whose behalf I address you tonight. Let us acknowledge that we hold this meeting on land formerly occupied by the Nation. Can you hear me?
We can. There's a little background noise. That's a little better. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Our letter dated March 16th contains detailed recommendations for this year's budget. In short, we applaud you for pursuing the plastic bag tax and establishing the curbside food composting program. Well done. We wish you to restore funding for Arlington Air staff and consider adding a second urban forester for underserved communities. We ask you to reinstate programs that foster resident participation in environmental solutions, such as Stormwater Wise, the Virginia Cooperative Extension Programs, and the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. Also, please prioritize deer management as soon as possible so that biodiversity is not browsed away. But I'm here tonight mostly to express to you that you govern a hopeful people. It has been said that the greatest risk of all is hope, because the familiar is so beguiling even when it is unsustainable. The residents of Arlington County risked hope by turning to you to address racial injustice after the murder of George Floyd, and you responded in hope by creating a new position of Chief Race and Equity Officer to guide us all to do better. We turn to you now in hope to ask you to consider creating the position of a county-wide environmental leader to guide us all in coordinating a public-private response to the environmental degradation of Arlington's water, land, and air. While some individuals can take some actions sometimes to counter the effects of climate change, and while various county departments can take some action sometimes to address climate issues, the most powerful response is the coordination of such public and private efforts that only a county-wide leader can manage. A county-wide leader can make sure the county departments are not working at cross purposes, that all are doing their part, and that environmental problems are reviewed systematically, keeping the entire Arlington ecosystem as the top priority. A county-wide leader could advise the county on what is required for a strategic, comprehensive approach, mitigating the need to respond to emergencies in a reactive way. Low wealth residents are most vulnerable to the effects of environmental degradation. So we ask you to look at the environmental budget with an equity lens. We appreciate your outstanding effort during the pandemic and invite you to come to our biophilia program on April 14th at 6:30. Thank you so much for your leadership.
Our next speaker is Chris Rains, followed by Dean Amell. Dean Amell.
Mr. Rains.
Hi.
Mr. Rains, are you there?
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I am Chris Rains, Chair of the Arlington Chamber of Commerce Hotel General Management Committee. And my goal in speaking tonight is to highlight how imperative it is for ACVS's budget or operating budget to not be cut, and for hospitality grants to be considered to help the hotel community through this time. The ACVS team need adequate resources to compete with our neighboring jurisdictions. These resources are critical as we fight for drive time traffic. This is mostly leisure traffic and is really one of the only primary sources of business that we currently have. Historically, hotels have needed demand boosts seasonally, and ACVS was always aware of when we needed those. But we now always need business, and the competition is higher than ever. I urge the board to consider reinstating the approximately $130,000 that was cut from the ACVS operating budget. I would also ask the board to consider grants for management companies and hotels as other jurisdictions have allowed. These funds will allow us to bring back our hospitality employees at a faster pace. Our area has furloughed 70 to 80% of our employees, some of which may not return to hospitality. However, it's these employees that have always been the backbone of the Arlington hospitality industry, and I think we should do everything we can to help them at this time. These two items will allow us to compete for the business we need to make it through this difficult time and to come out on the other side better and ready to serve our guests in Arlington. I thank you for your time and for your consideration this evening. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Rains.
Our final speaker is Dean Amell.
Mr. Amell.
Good evening, Chair DeFerranti and members of the board. On Saturday, you should have received a 3-page letter from John Bloom containing the Sierra Club's comments on the FY22 budget. I'll summarize some of those comments. The manager's budget rightly focuses on our current pandemic, using the word COVID 525 times. However, it does not use the phrase climate change even once. This is a rough measure of the challenge before us. We need to get to the point where every program, project, and procurement funded through this budget is reviewed for opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Other governments are solving these problems by adopting a whole of government approach to systematically integrate goals across administrative boundaries. The county is effectively doing this in addressing COVID inequity, for example, but has not extended this approach to climate change. In our letter, we recommend measures the county could adopt. Arlington adopted an ambitious but achievable goal of 100% renewable electricity by 2035. One of the most common strategies being used by other communities to achieve similar goals is through community choice aggregation. Legal and economic analyses for Arlington indicate that this approach is legally sound and economically desirable and could deliver greenhouse gas benefits far in excess of any other strategy at little or no net cost to the county or utility customers. The county is proceeding with detailed planning necessary to electrify all of its vehicle fleets. Already, zero-emission sedans are, on average, less expensive than fossil fuel sedans on a total cost of ownership basis. Our letter outlines 3 actions the county should take now to buy ZEV sedans. Moving beyond climate issues, we see 2 currently underfunded or unfunded solid waste management projects that should be priorities for action in FY22. First, the county should seize the moment created by Governor Northam's recent executive order phasing out the use of single-use plastics by state government to join that effort. Second, the county is long overdue for the careful study and planning needed to achieve goals established by the Zero Waste Resolution of 2015. Funds should be included to begin this work in FY22. We're happy to see that the Solid Waste Bureau will begin curbside collection of food scraps in September, and we also support the county's effort to adopt a plastic bag tax as soon as regulatory details are clarified. On another issue, for both noise and pollution reasons, the board should request development of a plan for the Parks Department to phase out its use of gas-powered leaf blowers, with implementation begin in FY22 and then no later than FY25. Finally, the proposed cuts to VCE staff and programs should be reconsidered. These programs generate nearly 43,000 volunteer hours valued at $2.3 million per year. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Amel. With that, unless there are there any speakers that we missed over that we want to make sure we've covered? I don't believe that anyone else is left, unless, Madam Clerk, there are any in the 3-minute segment. So, with that, I will go ahead and move, unless you have speakers left, Madam Clerk?
No, I do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, I will go ahead and move that we close the public hearing. And I think usually we may do this by voice vote, but because we're virtual, I'll just ask if there's a second.
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 Thank you. And we'll just do the quick roll call vote because we're virtual. So the motion is to close the public hearing and carry over action on these items to the April 17th County Board meeting and then the recessed April 20th County Board meeting. The motion's been made. There's a second. I'll go ahead and call the roll. Miss Garvey.
Aye.
Miss Crystal.
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey.
Aye.
Mr. Carantonis.
Aye.
And Mr. DeFranti, the chair, also votes aye. So we've closed the public hearing. We carried over action until April 17th and April 20th. For those still with us and listening, I just want to thank you for your comments. We listened, we took notes, and they make a difference. Your input is important to us. We'll have a virtual work session next Monday, April 12th with the school board, followed by 2 work sessions to mark up and finalize the budget proposal before adoption at the virtual April 17th County Board meeting, which may end in the recessed April 20th board meeting. Please continue to email your feedback on the budget to us via email at countyboard@arlingtonva.us. And with that, everyone be well, have a good evening, and we will adjourn for the evening. Thank you, colleagues and staff.